I would like to welcome from London Dr. Marcos Papadopoulos, expert on international relations, specialized in Middle East affairs. Hello, sir, Dr. Marcos. Dr. Marcos, right now, everyone is interested to secure a deal regarding the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, speaking about the necessity of having international guarantees. Everyone is looking for that. Do you think we are too far from securing a deal that could solve the issue of the Strait of Hormuz quickly?
Yes, I agree with your analysis. This is a very precarious truce, and it could therefore collapse at any moment in time. Iran and the Iranian people will not tolerate a gun being put to their head. The Americans and the Israelis tried that when they savagely, barbarically bombed Iran. And how did Iran and the Iranian people respond? They responded in a most ferocious way, which devastated American military bases in the region and devastated large parts of Israel. Now, Trump is saying that the illegal naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz will remain in force until there is a permanent solution, a permanent agreement between Washington and Tehran. Well, again, the Iranian people will not tolerate a gun being put to their head. So it is in everyone's interests, in particular, the people of the region, for there to be a permanent ceasefire. But in all of this, we must not forget one major cardinal factor, the Israeli factor. Israel does not want there to be a permanent ceasefire. Israel does not want there to be an agreement between Washington and Tehran. Other countries in the world are seeking a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, and a solution, but not Israel. And why is that so important? Because Trump and much of the Trump administration are controlled by the Israelis. Indeed, the American political commentator Tucker Carlson recently said that. Tucker Carlson said clearly that Trump is controlled not simply by Netanyahu, but by the Israeli state as a whole.
Yes, sir. Even this it was not the main point which we want to discuss, but according to your analysis, how Trump can pass this as the commander or the president for the most important country when we see this statement comments that Israel is a decision maker and Israel controls the decision of US.
Well, first of all, we need to understand the actual structure of power in America. The president is not in control, or at the very least, is not fully in control. The American deep state or the American ruling elite ultimately is in control. And two of the main components of the American ruling elite is the military industrial complex and Zionists. This doesn't just apply to Trump, it applies to all of his predecessors, Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, and so on and so on. That is the reality of the structure of power in America. But it is true to say that Trump is particularly controlled by the Israelis for a number of reasons, one of them being his business dealings with the Israelis. So, for example, Sheldon Adelson, or the late Sheldon Adelson. It was Mr. Adelson who introduced Netanyahu and Trump to each other. So that is why countries such as China and Pakistan can attempt to find a peaceful solution to the situation between America and Iran. And I wish them well. Of course, I wish them well. But in all of this, we cannot ignore the reality that Trump is beholden to Israel, that Israel, because of its influence in America through Zionism in particular, wields massive power in America. Virtually every member of Congress is bought and paid for by the Israelis, bought and paid for by Zionists. So we can talk about international efforts to find a permanent ceasefire, but those efforts will be in vain because of the Israeli factor.
So, Dr. Marcos, what are the chances of securing a deal between Iran and the US? Both sides want to secure a deal. There are initiatives that are offered, and even after the issue of the Strait of Hormuz rising, and speaking about American steps after international pressure, U.S. has retreated a little bit in order to secure a deal. So do you think we are facing a very, very difficult issues as everything which is on the table is not suitable with the Israeli perspective?
Of course, nothing is impossible, but I myself am not optimistic. Why? Because it all revolves around Trump and other senior members of his administration. If, for example, Trump was to resign today, then it's possible, just possible, that his successor would not be as controlled by the Israelis as Trump is. And in those circumstances, then a permanent ceasefire could be achieved. Or if this situation lasts until this November, when there are the midterm elections in America, and the Republican Party is expected to lose control of the Senate and the House of Representatives, then in those circumstances, Trump's wings would be clipped, so to speak, and that would bring about an end to the war. Not that the Democrats are friends to the Arab people, not that they're friends to Iran, not that they're not controlled by the Zionists, but the Democrats are doing everything they can to bring Trump down. But again, the Democrats are as dangerous to world peace as are the Republicans. So in those two circumstances, which I've just outlined, therein could be a possibility for a permanent ceasefire. Also, perhaps Trump somehow can manage to wriggle his way out, maneuver his way out from the control that the Israelis have over him. I find that very difficult to believe. But then again, I'm not privy to all the specific details behind the scenes, but it is possible. So in those three scenarios, that is how a permanent ceasefire could be achieved. Other than that, I don't see how one is possible.
Dr. Marcos, how think it's logical that U.S. can offer this draft in the United Nations Security Council in order to secure the freedom of navigation? After all, what happened?
The United Nations, on paper, in theory, is a sound project, is a sound concept. However, for many, many decades now, the United Nations has been infiltrated and wielded as a very dangerous weapon by powerful countries in the world, such as America, such as Britain, such as Israel. So going to the United Nations achieves nothing. Ask the Palestinian people what the United Nations has done for them. Zero. The United Nations is comprised of the countries of the world. So the United Nations is powerless, and more so the United Nations provides cover for countries such as Israel. Trump can go to the United Nations Security Council. He can outline his proposals for peace. But then again, countries such as Russia and China know that Trump is controlled by the Israelis. So it would simply be an exercise in propaganda by Trump going to the United Nations to present himself as being a man of peace, as seeking a permanent truce. But it would just be for show. It would just be for show. We can never, ever neglect or underestimate the sheer importance of the Israel factor. I would also extend the Israel factor to Russia. What has Russia done to protect the Palestinian people? What has Russia done to protect Lebanon? Indeed, what has Russia done to protect Iran? Okay, Russia has provided military assistance, intelligence assistance, but not that much. The reason being, ever since the end of the Soviet Union, the end of Soviet communism, Zionism has gained a foothold in Russia. That is why Russia may criticize Israel, but it doesn't do any more than that. Compare and contrast that with how the Soviet Union approached Israel. All Arabs will know how hardline the Soviet Union's stance was towards Israel.
Do you think this means, Dr. Marcos, that we are facing an international community who lack the trust of its order or its system? Everyone is speaking about the necessity of having international order, but there is no trust in this system or the international order. And after you have mentioned in the Gaza Strip and in Palestine in general, and these major files which was discussed in the Security Council, and nothing was achieved. Do you think that the international community should lose its trust in the order or the international system?
I completely agree with your analysis. The international community means nothing. The international community, according to the West, means Western countries along with Israel. That's the international community. It is typical language of the Western ruling elites. No Arab country is ever mentioned in comprising the international community. It is only ever Western countries along with Israel. So what we need to say instead is global opinion, public opinion in the world, because that includes every single race in the world. The international community is a propaganda term. We should stop using it because, as I said, Egypt isn't mentioned in that. Palestine isn't mentioned in that. Iran and Lebanon aren't mentioned in that. But yes, global public opinion understands that the United Nations means nothing, that the international community is a propaganda term and means nothing. Global public opinion understands that countries such as America and Britain and Israel believe that might is right. They will use violence because they are so powerful. And when I say America and Britain, I don't mean the British people. I don't mean the American people, because the American and the British people are being brutally oppressed by the American deep state and by the British ruling elite, respectively. I am talking about the dark forces which rule Britain and rule America. They are extremely violent entities. So global public opinion ideally must form unity. They must come together. But the problem is that that is not going to happen. It is like the Arab League. The Arab League has done nothing for the Palestinian people because the Arab League does not represent the ordinary Arab. It doesn't represent the ordinary Egyptian. The Arab League is beholden to Israel and beholden to the Western ruling elites.
I would like to thank you so much, Dr. Marcos Papadopoulos, the expert on international relations and specialized in the Middle East affairs. Thanks so much for being with us.